Hi, we're Oxygen Conservation, and this is the Shoe Room Sessions. Shannon, thank you for hosting us.
Absolutely. So happy you're here.
Can you tell people out there who you are and what you do?
Yes, I'm Shannon Smith. I am the Chief Commercial Officer for Chestnut Carbon. I've been here for just over 2 years, and I have, I will say that my role encompasses two very different but connected parts of our business. I am responsible for signing private landowners across the U.S. up for our Forest Conservation Membership Program, which is the source of our IFM carbon credits. And then I'm also responsible for selling our carbon credits once they've been registered and issued and are ready for sale. Well, actually, I should say either as we are preparing them to be issued. So it could be a futures contract or once they've been issued. So, but in any case, responsible for the sourcing on one side and then ultimately the sales of the carbon credits on the other. And yeah, it's been a fascinating 2 years here.
Huge role. Can you give people an understanding and a feel for what the business is at Chestnut and the scale you're at now?
Sure. So Chestnut was founded in 2022 to be a exclusively US-based forest carbon project developer. So we bought a company, Chestnut was founded and then bought a company called Forest Carbon Works, which is a forest conservation membership program that is a carbon project developer. So bought Forest Carbon Works, rolled that under the Chestnut brand, and now it is a subsidiary of Chestnut, and we have continued to operate that. So that's half of our business is what is called IFM, or improved forest management. So taking a private landowner that owns forests, they do something to manage the forest in a more environmentally friendly, more carbon sequestering oriented way. And then we issue carbon removal credits against that. So that's one product in the portfolio, and we have a whole team that's focused on that. And then we also, as Chestnut Carbon, registered a forest restoration project. So this is, it's either called ARR or afforestation, but it's purchasing land which is degraded, that has not had any trees on it in at least 10 years, usually much longer. It's often cattle pasture or crop land. We purchase the land, we prep it, and then we plant diverse native seedlings on it. So we are restoring native forests. We have planted over 30,000 acres that we have purchased and planted, and are on quite an aggressive land buying mission, because we ultimately want to have 60, 80, 100,000 acres under our forest management. So, so that is forest restoration, restoring forests where they have not been before, and doing it in a way that is intended to replicate or become, not replicate, but become a very diverse native looking forest, as opposed to like a pine plantation or something that there are project developers that are doing that, but ours are intended to be planted as forests, remain forests, and sequester all that carbon that trees are so good at doing.
Amazing. And you've had some really iconic making deals that have happened at the moment with JP Morgan and Microsoft and people like that. Could you talk to that a little?
Sure. So I started 2 years ago, and our CFO, Greg Anab, started the same day I did. And the two of us spent the majority of our first 6 months here.
Did you know each other before?
We did not.
Okay.
No. So we started, we're thrown into this together and spent, I guess, 5 months just working with the Microsoft carbon buying team to get a Microsoft contract signed. So in December of 2023, we signed our first ever purchase contract, and it was a 15-year offtake with Microsoft, and that's for our forest restoration.
And did you have land at this point, or that's a contract prior to the acquisition of the underlying land?
We did have some land at that point. We had purchased and planted 6,000 acres, and that's what they diligenced. And then we continued to buy land through 2024, and then of course through 2025. But that started our relationship with them. And since then, we have signed 2 more offtake contracts with Microsoft, the last being 25 years, two 25-year contracts that sort of start 1 year after the other. So a total of 26 years of delivery for 7 million tons of removal.
Which is the
So,
vast majority of the global market of voluntary carbon credits that have moved.
well, it was a big contract, and it was a big commitment on their side, and a big, frankly, show of confidence in us and what we can deliver. And that is a big part of that contract that enabled us to get a $210 million debt financing facility led by JP Morgan, but with several other banks in the syndicate, that we closed a month ago. And that was entirely the collateral, essentially, was our Microsoft contract. And then that allowed us to raise more equity. So we now have a 210 million debt facility and a 250 million equity raise, majority of which is going to purchase land and trees.
Astonishing achievement. So I often talk about how, so we started 2022, bought our first land in the January, and I talk about how in the UK, so purely our geography, but a big project was £30,000 in the environmental sector.
Yeah.
Our portfolio is valued somewhere north of 300 million now, so we've been able to do that. You're going to double that in terms of the debt funding you've got and the equity in place. Do you have a feel for the impact that's had globally? Because it's astonishing.
Well, you're very kind to say that. I think that over the past 2 years, but really even the last year, Chestnut has made incredible strides in the milestones that we are hitting and the kind of the newsworthy deals, financing. I'll get back to our other customers that we're working with, but I do think that now going into our third climate week, people are saying that we are leading the industry and that we are becoming a developer to watch, that we are showing people not only what good looks like in terms of our product and the way that our team is managing, but that we're also we just signed a, as we called it, a first of its kind financing, and we hope that this is where the industry can go. Carbon developers have always been really, really challenged with where do they get financing, because it's often a lot of upfront costs, whether you're buying land to plant trees or you're building some kind of facility. And traditional infrastructure and traditional energy, they have playbooks for financing, and carbon hasn't. And so we are now in a situation that we are able, because we have a 25-year plus contracted cash flows with Microsoft, we're able to now start putting into place project financing that looks more like a PPP or a traditional infrastructure or energy contract. So I think that in particular is something that we can really point to and say we hope that we are leading the industry in the evolution of how this should work. But also showing that long-term contracts against carbon removal can be stood up. And we're now seeing more buyers come into the market and asking for 5 or 10 or 15-year future offtake contracts.
And are they principally the hyperscalers, the data and tech focused businesses?
The technology companies are certainly leading that effort, but the strategy consulting firms, the McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Capgemini, there are others that are in market looking for long-term offtakes.
In the UK, it's law firms as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then so the technology companies, the strategy consultants, and then some of the financial service companies are starting to look at long-term offtakes as well. And then sort of a longer list of some CPG companies and other consumer goods types of companies are continuing to be active. And we are seeing them looking for longer term offtakes. And I think, there are certainly other developers that are doing that, but I think we are really on that map of a company to sort of model after.
You're way too modest. I would say you are the company to model after. And you won't answer this one particularly if I ask you about what you think you did well to secure that deal. But perhaps if you share what Microsoft shared with you that they liked about your product and offering, maybe you'll be a bit more comfortable to describe.
Certainly. So we really went after this particular project, wanting to, take everything that was required by the registry and the methodology and, you know, do it as good or better than what the bare minimum requirements were. And it was everything from the SDG goals that we were trying to address. It was our community engagement and stakeholder engagement plans. Like, we ended up putting together a very robust community engagement plan and all of the ways that we were interacting with and, reaching out to and engaging with stakeholders across the communities in which we're operating. And that was really important to Microsoft in particular.
And is incredibly challenging because I think people sometimes, when they ask about a local person's perspective or a community view, they assume it's one. Often it's a complete range of views and perspectives. So to listen to those, to engage with them, and to respond to them in a meaningful way takes time, effort, and investment in doing so.
It sure does. Yeah. And we're at this point in 8 states, and we have acquired over 60,000 acres and already have 30,000 of those acres planted, and a huge volume of that will be planted this year and ongoing. We have a very large, as I said earlier, land acquisition target just to deliver on our Microsoft commitment. And we want to be able to sell to other buyers too. So, I think that so that just back to your question, the community engagement was a big part of what we, I think, did above and beyond what was required. And also just our tree species mix. I mean, many developers, particularly in the Southeast, they're really, really focused on softwood and primarily pine. And part of their project plan is to harvest it. And that's part of their revenue model. But from the beginning, we said we are planting a diverse native forest. We have up to 18 hardwood species on every land parcel. And we have this whole data science team that is completely optimizing each parcel based on its soil and its drainage and its weather patterns for
And
exactly.
the future.
And yes,
in terms of climate change scenario and modeling and things, we spoke about that before,
yeah,
that building in resilience to the species mix and what you do there is so important as well.
yes. And so, I mean, our contract with Microsoft actually specifies what % of the species mix needs to be hardwood versus softwood and how many different species we're trying to plant on each parcel. So this whole concept of truly restoring a native forest was a big part of what differentiated us. And we partnered with a nursery that's based throughout the Southeast called ArborGen, and we have contracted for 30% of the hardwood seedlings in the South. So it's, I think and we did all of that before we even started talking to Microsoft. So a lot of what we already had in place really appealed to them in terms of, this is as pure and noble and kind of optimized for carbon sequestration as a project can be. And then we collaborated with them further on other ways to improve what we were doing. And something that we're really starting to lean into now that we've had trees in the ground for several years, is starting to look for other ways that we can quantify the economic impact that we're having in the region, the environmental impact that we're having in the region. Is there a way that we can actually track and measure and quantify the water quality improvements that we have in the region, because we've converted that land from cattle pasture, which is not good for air or water, to a native forest? What sort of jobs and economic opportunities are we giving people who are working the land and doing our forest crews, and other ways that we are quantifying the impact beyond just carbon sequestration. So that's another thing that I think will continue to enable us to hold this project up, is just a model example.
So we have a head of environment who is so into river systems. His name is Dan the Fish. And hey Dan, and he's taken out more weirs to improve fish passage than anyone else in the UK. And across all of our river systems, he's put in ongoing remote sensors that record water quality, turbidity, temperature,
That's amazing.
24/7, and collect that back, so we can see what the overall effect of our portfolio. So we've got 50,000
We may want to borrow
acres.
him.
No, he would want to come across here and go fishing though, so he would love that.
Yeah.
From when I first heard about you guys, the commitment to quality was something that echoed with us so much. And you just brought it to life there with some examples in Microsoft. Can you let us inside behind the scenes about, for so many businesses when they start up, they want to be quick and cheap and would almost scale's the quickest thing to get to, but they don't so rarely talk about quality. But it's clear the product had to be brilliant for you. Why was that so important to the ethos, and how has it informed everything else?
So this is truly going back to our origin story. So we were founded by Kimridge, which is a private equity alternative asset manager and investor, and they'd been around for over a decade, and they had been investing in traditional energy. They actually have oil and gas operations in the Rockies, and they had purchased an oil company called Civitas in Colorado, and they wanted to deliver a net zero product. So they said, if we're going to deliver this energy product, then we want to find carbon removal credits that we can pair with this product, because Colorado has a very strong environmental, kind of ethos. And they started looking around at all of the carbon credits that were available, and they did not see anything that they believed was very high quality at a essentially affordable price, a price that would make sense to sort of land and scale. And they said, if we can't buy it, we will build it. And that's when they decided to create a carbon project developer, and that's where the idea for Chestnut came from. So from the beginning, they were driven entirely by the fact that they looked for high quality credits at a price that made sense. I won't say was inexpensive, but made sense as in terms of the value proposition. And so from the beginning, when they looked to buy Forest Carbon Works, they looked for a really high quality developer, and clearly a product team and sales and foresters and so forth that were that committed to the quality and the integrity of the product.
That's the word, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so important.
And so they bought that. And then when they started the Chestnut Restoration Project, it was the same. It was from the beginning, this was not something that they wanted to, cut corners, bring something to market quickly. They wanted something that would stand the test of time, that would be entirely defensible on all of its attributes, because we had the benefit of getting founded after the slew of scandals that were hitting the nature-based project market. And so they knew what the past, what the past mistakes, I guess, had been.
Yeah, the consequences of not doing it to a quality and a standard.
Yeah, some of the people, and we've talked about the fact that the projects themselves probably were fine, but the way that they were managed, the way that they were, positioned and sold, was not. And so we had the benefit of that hindsight of saying, we've seen what can go wrong, and we don't want any risk to that. We want to be able to, year after year after year, bring a credit to market that the quality is going to be unassailable, and that we literally call ourselves like brand risk insurance. Like, you will never have your name in the media as having bought a credit that later the developer came out to have been shady.
I don't know if it
Questionable.
translates UK to US, but our credits are described as reassuringly expensive.
Yeah,
Because that's what you're getting. You're getting the confidence that you're not going to end up in a situation like a Volkswagen car scandal type situation. Have you encountered any sort of misconceptions about the sector? So one we often get is a carbon credit is just paying to pollute. Because in the UK, people don't understand the difference between a regulated market, which is paying to pollute, and the voluntary market, where you're actually delivering something better for the environment. Are there any frequent ones of those you encounter?
Yeah, I think that is a significant one, and just to add on to that, and then I have others. There is this idea that they're just buying the ability to pollute, and the thing is, almost every company, certainly every company that I've ever spoken to, that is paying money for a voluntary product is without question also going through other initiatives within their business to decarbonize.
100%.
So it's, we are not going to be in an emissionless energy environment anytime soon, not in our lifetime. So we're going to use energy and other kinds of just manufacturing and travel and all the things that we do to live our life. Even if we decarbonize, even if we reduce emissions, there are still going to be emissions. So there is a meaningful and very valuable role for carbon removal and avoidance in some situations, but we sell carbon removal. So carbon removal to offset what you can't stop from emitting. So I really think that this idea that it's, paying to pollute, they're likely already paying to try to decarbonize, and you can't decarbonize 100%.
Those people who take that line of criticism have never tried to get a board to pay for anything. Because anyone who has asked the board to write a big check, the next thing is, how do we not write this check again?
Yes.
So of course they're going to try and do something. So I think that one's often just a perspective that doesn't understand how money moves through businesses.
And it's in just acknowledging that no matter how idealistic you are, your company, whatever it is you do, even you as an individual, but let's just say your companies are not going to be able to have zero emissions, no matter how dedicated they are. So I'd rather them buy something to offset what they are emitting. So that's one thing, following up on your point. The other thing is this concept that nature-based carbon removal isn't worthwhile or isn't as valuable because it doesn't have 1,000+ year guaranteed storage. And that is the thing that I am very supportive of, having a broad portfolio across the globe of different ways to capture carbon. And I really hope that we find ways to scale DAC more cost effectively, and that we can figure out how to actually track things like biochar and enhanced rock weathering.
I really struggle with those.
I do too, but I want to be supportive because we need it all. But the buyers and some of the kind of regulatory bodies and others that are coming out and saying that nature-based carbon capture isn't as valuable, and may be not valuable at all because it doesn't guarantee storage for 1,000 years. And I just want to kind of tear my hair out and say, we have a problem today. We have a global climate crisis and extreme weather pattern today because we are emitting too much carbon in the air today. So if we can conserve a forest, and we have 20 years that carbon is sequestered where it otherwise wouldn't be, that is valuable today. And so, our big message is, have a balanced portfolio, but if you're serious about your impact for the next 10, 20+ years, it's going to have to be nature-based. And trees are by far the largest carbon removal category. I know there are some other interesting ones coming online. There's a lot that they're doing with marine and soil and other nature-based removal, but trees are where the volume is. So I think that and most buyers, particularly of large volumes, recognize that, but there is still kind of a, sort of pervasive side of the conversation that keeps coming back to, it's got to be sort of 1,000+ years of sequestration. And I'm like, I'm not going to be around then, so I'm not even going to know if it worked. Like, how are you going to know if it was sequestered for 1,000 years? Because no one sitting in this room measuring it is actually going to be able to prove that out. But still, I'm not saying the science doesn't show that it should be, but I just don't think that should be the bar today.
We shouldn't let perfect be the enemy of better.
Yes. Yes.
The other thing about, so I think it is not possible for nature-based solutions to solve this problem. We need everything.
Yeah.
And actually, we need the Tesla equivalent of mechanical, technological carbon capture to store the vast majority. That is going to be the type of solution that gets us there. But I also want to give my kids a world that's worth living in as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the nature-based stuff is really important to us, because yes, you get the carbon. Absolutely, that's what fuels the electric motor of improvement in this space. But you also get better habitat and better water quality and spaces for people and wildlife and adventure and all those things. You don't get those from a mechanical machine that's stripping carbon out of the atmosphere.
Yep.
So we totally need both. I've rarely had the permanency argument in the UK. That's not one we get a lot. There's still quite a lot of the moral argument that it's inappropriate to put a price on improving the environment or nature. So I'll tell one anecdote and then ask you that question. So we closed the IP Investor Conference in Rotterdam last week, and after the event, this gentleman on a table over from us was having a series of sort of one-to-ones with various different pension fund investors, and this one chap, the French gentleman, sat down and just started yelling at him about how inappropriate and immoral it was to think about nature as an asset class because nature's priceless. And my favorite comeback to that is we don't treat it as priceless, we treat it as worthless. If you don't put a number on anything, we treat it terribly. So do you get that moral argument much at all?
I have not ever gotten the moral argument that you can't put a price on nature.
How
No,
different is that?
no, that's
We get that a
fascinating.
lot
Wow.
from the NGOs and community groups saying, no, 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 it's immoral to make a profit or money out of this because it's beyond profit.
Okay. Well, that's a whole new barrier to throw up to yet another, thing that's already difficult to
It's the thing
do.
you said before about that idealized version of the world. You can live in it. It doesn't make it not true. We're all having emissions. We're all doing that. Have you hit the point whereby, so we're the first company in the UK to get to a scale and a level where we're hitting structural challenges on things. So revenue accounting rules for recognizing revenue. If that smile says yes, you've had a similar
Yeah.
challenge. Things like how you can layer government subsidy with debt funding on top of things, access issues, things like that. Have you started to encounter those things by being the first people to get there?
So we are not eligible for or trying to secure any type of government funding.
That's interesting.
The ERA has didn't touch any aspect of our business. So
It is a key model for us on our woodland creation.
oh, interesting. Okay, so that I guess in the time when the renewables were all getting a ton of government funding, we were like, oh, we wish that we were eligible for that. And now that so much of it's been yanked, we're like, oh, aren't we fortunate that none of our funding
And
just got
it does
yanked?
slow us down as well. So it's a 2-year process to get that.
Yeah,
So we've managed to use that opportunistically by doing additional baselining, additional ecological surveys. It gives us more seasons, but it does slow us down. And
interesting.
the environment sector in the UK is one where the word return was something that no one understood years ago. They wanted investment, but they thought it was a gift. They didn't understand that you had to.
Philanthropy.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's
So now that 2 years really hits an IRR for you. It really damages it, but on balance, it is still better for us to pursue the funding. That won't go on forever. We've done our final transaction in this portfolio. So we've got 12 estates in what we call Portfolio 1. We're recording this mid-September, so it'll be announced at the end of September, that 12th one. And then we'll start building Portfolio 2. How much subsidies plays a role in that will be diminishing, I think.
interesting. I realized I said ERA, I meant IRA, but the Inflation Reduction Act
Yeah.
that had funded a lot of companies here. But that's I will say if that is an option for you to get funding that way, then even if it is bureaucratic and kind of time consuming, I'm sure it's still worth it because it is still difficult to get enough funding for the kinds of work that we do.
It is, completely. So any other structural challenges that you've encountered because the sector isn't used to the scale?
Uh, I think, when we set out, it was very much our goal to try to figure out how to get what we just called lower cost of capital, funding a project like ours in which we are buying the land, which is quite unusual.
Yep.
We were happy to have the equity financing and be able to get make so much progress on that. But we knew from the beginning that to grow to the scale that we wanted to and to spend what we wanted to on land, that was just going to be difficult to finance 100% with equity. So from the beginning, we started trying to figure out how can we get debt financing on this. And, I give our CFO and our GC and many others a lot of credit for saying, here are the components. We have done project finance in the infrastructure or energy sector. And so we are going to figure out what we can do to mirror that with a project finance facility for Chestnut. And it was not easy and really was only enabled because we were able to sign the Microsoft contract, and being one of 2 AAA rated companies here, that worked. But I think that was the biggest hurdle structurally and took a lot of people a lot of time to figure out, but ultimately we were successful in doing so. I think, there are other things that are a little bit more carbon market sort of specific, just what is the arbiter of quality, what rating or registry or organization are people looking to determine what quality is, and trying to, as trends in the market change and evolve, and today people want this kind of credit and are looking at these ratings, and then next year it's something else. And it's sort of how do we maintain a consistent project as the environment around us is changing and is fairly somewhat tumultuous.
Yeah,
So
it's
I think
daily, isn't it? Changes daily.
it can be kind of daily.
Yeah.
And right now, what most buyers are starting to look to is the ICVCM has their core carbon principles, the CCPs, and they are evaluating project developer methodology, or they're developing, sorry, they are evaluating registry methodologies. And then there's a small number that they have said are now CCP approved. And so I think there's this huge industry, wave of trying to move towards those, because buyers are starting to ask for them, so developers are moving to them. So I feel like that's a structural sort of a bit of just a hurdle that we're trying to navigate. And we don't want to try to change our methodology every year based on what this year's shiny object is. But at the same time, we're a commercial entity with product to sell.
Yeah.
So we need to be mindful and very connected to what, kind of what is going on in terms of the, what is delineating what a quality credit is. And it just the goalposts keep changing.
I feel so lucky that we have these problems, right? Because we've worked hard to earn them. You only have them if you're at the zenith of a sector, if you're pushing things forward and doing things other people hadn't done before. Otherwise, it's easy. I think in 10 or 15 years, they're going to be teaching natural capital MBAs at Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard. Everyone's going to know the same thing. Like renewables now. How do you differentiate yourself if you're a new startup renewable? It's so hard because people know how it works. We're living at the time when the storming and forming time of the sector. So whenever the team get frustrated about something, I'm like, congratulations, you've earned that problem to solve. I love it.
That is such a delightful way to look at it. And hopefully that, really motivates them.
Elle's nodding. My rule is, say we're playing chess and something goes wrong. It's like, well, what's the opportunity this now gives us? You can't mourn the past, it's gone. So looking at this situation, what new opportunities does it bring? Which I love. Speaking of opportunities, you're doing a huge amount with technology, and that's a key part of what you do. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we have what I will call a 3-part system, and it's all proprietary. It's all been homegrown, and we consider it one of our greatest kind of material assets. So we started, and this was developed for Chestnut, a data science kind of platform that we call the Chestnut Land Explorer. Catchy, but it is a data set which is, compiles millions of pieces of data all about the U.S. forest and soil and drainage, and it is literally it's both external sources and also internal data that we've collected over time ourselves, and we use this to very quickly analyze any parcel of land in the entire lower 48 states. And it is a way that in 10 minutes, our data science or our land acquisition team can go in and put in a parcel, kind of lat and long, and they can get, what do we think that the carbon sequestration potential is for that plot of land? And we initially use that and still use that all the time, and we're just making it better all the time for our land acquisition. But now we're also using it for our forest conservation membership program to be able to say, given that area of the country and that tree species mix and age and all the other components that go into it, how productive is the forest? How many IFM credits are we going to get out of that land parcel? And that actually informs the financial offer that we make to the landowner. So that is our Land Explorer tool, and it is a desk-based platform, but it is leveraging a ton of data to allow us to very quickly estimate carbon productivity. So that's the first step.
In terms of when your inflow of potential land opportunities, is that land agent saying to you, a piece of land's available and then you evaluate it, or are you evaluating and you're proactively going to a private seller and knocking on the door?
It is both,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure that they're sort of going just and knocking on a door as much as we now have relationships with, landowners and brokers in all these different regions.
Yeah.
And so we can definitely say, this general area we've mapped as being very desirable. If you have or see any land that might be available, it might be off market,
Yeah.
but somebody
All of
knows
Scotland
somebody.
is. The wastelands, honestly, I mean, everybody knows, but
Mhm.
they say it's off
Yeah.
market. Do the land brokers and agencies, do they understand the fact that you've got that model?
I assume so.
Okay.
Yes.
So in the UK, there's still a very traditional approach to selling land, and someone turns up in tweed with elbow patches and tells you how many grouse you've got or how many deer, and that's not a joke. That's
Mhm.
literally how it's still valued.
Yep.
And then we turn up as we do, and we've got a data-led approach to it, and we shop in that gap still.
Mhm.
So we visited 100 estates in person to buy the 12, because the first 2 or 3 years we were calibrating the model each time with data and information.
Mhm.
But yeah, the echoes are just amazing.
It's really wild.
Yeah.
I really hope that I can visit some of your properties.
We would love you to.
They
Yeah.
look so. I've looked at all of them on the site. They're stunning. So Land Explorer, and then the second piece of our system is a handheld device that it is a tree inventory measurement tool. And so this was developed in-house. We literally manufacture them, kind of as a white label, but they're just for us. And it's a little LIDAR device that attaches to a smartphone. And the LIDAR device is taken out into field, and it is a fraction of the time and cost of taking traditional tree inventory. So, tree cruises for tree inventory data has been around forever. Used to be used for any number of reasons, for just basic forest management and timber management, but we use it for calculating. We capture all of the details of the tree in this, this LIDAR device, and then the smartphone allows it to get automatically uploaded to our data systems. And so that's our field tool, and it was a proprietary tool that we'd built in-house when Chestnut bought Forest Carbon Works. We have since patented it. So now we have a patent on this tree inventory. It's our MRV device. So that's a really critical part of our overall data process, because it is it is very intuitive. We can actually contract with cruisers all over the country, which is how we can operate in 37 states for our IFM, or across the Southeast for our afforestation. So they go out, they can take the LIDAR, bring all of that tree data into our system, and then last we have a sort of land-based system that is takes all of that data, identifies the tree, identifies the age of the tree, and and then ultimately the carbon sequestered, all the biomass, the percent of biomass that's carbon, and then that allows us to do all of our carbon calculations, and ultimately is underlying all of our registry reporting. So it's sort of that 3-part series, and then all of that data goes back into our Land Explorer, and so it becomes this beautiful sort of self-reinforcing and self-building data set.
How do you think about risk? So we live in kind of the, maybe, I wonder if you think we do live in this world. So I think I live at the collision between the environmental space and the financial world. And increasingly we're going from yeah, well, talk about my moral quandary that we get a lot. But we're transitioning from what was principally an environmental company to becoming a financial one. So and the environment sector generally, when I worked in government, the risk register was you'd write something on a spreadsheet and then never talk about it again. Whereas risk is managed very differently in the financial world. How do you think about risk management?
This has so many components.
We could do 2 hours on that, right?
Yeah, we actually could. I'll try to be succinct, but happy to delve into this because it's such an important part of our business, especially when we're selling a long-term project that is based on nature. So
it's inherently volatile in a crumbling climate.
Yeah, so I'll focus first on our forest restoration, because the 2 projects have very different risk mitigation factors. So first and foremost, we are buying the land. We own the land. So you don't have any kind of counterparty risk. And I think that this is quite a big differentiator from the many reforestation developers that are leasing land. And I think that's a very common model in the Southern Hemisphere. And there are developers in the US that are leasing land to plant trees. And, that there's just risk in that. There is risk in operating with another party. We'd have, taken that out of the equation because we buy the land. So it is ours. So that's the first step. Then we are significantly diversifying because we literally have land from Texas to Georgia in every state. So we are really diversifying our geography. And so if there is a pine beetle, infestation or a fire or any other natural force majeure, we're relatively buffered from that because our acreage is so diversified. And then we have this very diverse tree species mix. So if there is a pine beetle that wipes out a lot of pine, well, half or more of our trees are hardwood. And even within hardwood, we have, 10, 15 different species. So we're really, really diversifying against the natural risk that is quite common in really any forest.
And when you're thinking about a new acquisition, do you say, okay, we have X amount deployed in this geography at the moment with this type of species mix, so we won't have more of that? Is it calibrated to those buckets yet, or do you see an opportunity and evaluate it and then decide how it sits against that?
I think both go into the purchase equation. We definitely try, for lots of reasons, both risk mitigation but also community impact, to not be too heavily concentrated in any one place. Because we do get questioned about if you're going into a ranching community, if you're going into a farming community and you're buying that land and you're changing the land use, and there used to be someone whose cattle was on that land, there used to be someone whose soybean farm was on that land. And so in buying small parcels in a lot of different places, we're really reducing our impact on the agricultural fabric and economy of the region.
Our way of mitigating that, I don't know if land classifications work the same way here, but we have land that's graded from like 1 as the most prime arable land downwards, and we don't buy grade 1 or 2 land. We don't touch it.
Oh, okay.
So most of our land wasn't previously farmed, or certainly shouldn't have been. So it's upland farms that have sheep on them, which is the worst economics of any farming enterprise you can imagine. Even sheep farmers don't like farming sheep. It's their identity and it's who they've been, and it's what we've always done.
Yep.
Or grouse moors and things like that weren't financially productive. They were inherently trophy pieces. There's like 4 or 5 productive grouse moors in the UK that are like, again, the premium product that the best want to go to. The rest of them just don't economically work. This bit will not be very good for our audio viewers, but that's a map of our distribution. So much smaller geography than you're working with, but the exact same thing. So this is Bodmin Moor in Cornwall, which is like our southwest, kind of your west coast, all the way across to the absolute flat lands of Norfolk. So that's Nebraska for you guys, all the way up to the Rockies and the Highlands up here. So we've got every different type of geography, topography, landscape for that very reason.
Good.
Anyway, so that's how 12 is distributed in a similar way. So forgive me. We can now go back in. So risk side of things, we talked about diversification of what's on the estates itself and the portfolio in general. You mentioned wildfire on the way past. How do you think about wildfire and natural risks like that?
So the part of why we opted to go into the Southeast for our afforestation project was because within the US, it's relatively low fire risk, but it's not completely riskless. I mean, there was a huge fire in Texas last year, and Texas doesn't usually have fire, but we're in a new world.
Fire as a result of natural causes, or was that human intervention or poor behavior? Do you know?
I have to be honest, I don't know what they think started the fire, but I know by the time it was really in the news, it was like millions of acres. And so because Texas is hot and dry anyway, and then now that's exacerbated. So I don't know. I just don't remember what they think caused
the reason
it.
I asked the question is, in the UK, we don't have those extreme climates in the same way.
Yeah.
But there's a huge narrative around the risk of wildfire, and every media story you read and it gets to the bottom, and it's the same paragraph. It says is believed to have been caused by a cigarette or a barbecue in a place that there shouldn't have been.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on a trip about 12 months ago, speaking to every commercial forester I could in different bits of the world to understand their view of wildfire. And the narrative came back, yeah, 1 in a million is a lightning strike or a utility pole. It's people being in areas. So a lot of the people who have been very successful at managing wildfire risk say people can stay away. That's not our ethos. We're trying to bring people into landscapes, and especially with ecotourism and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's the balance we face. It's really difficult knowing that we're inherently increasing our risk of wildfire.
Yeah, just
by
by having human
Yeah.
interaction. Yeah, I mean, we do too. We have active hunting and fishing licenses on our property. And from our perspective, that is actually part of the risk mitigation sort of
From a herbivore
component.
management perspective.
Because and it's people on the property, and it's
Eyes
people
on.
that have a vested interest in the property remaining safe and healthy,
Yeah.
because they want the fish to be healthy, or they want the deer or elk or whatever it is that they're hunting to be healthy. And so we consider that part of our boots on the ground, kind of like land, sort of eyes on the land team, monitoring team. I was like, what word can I use? So I think for us, having people on the land is actually, but people who are hopefully, have a vested interest in maintaining the land as healthy forest, that we consider that part of our sort of army of people protecting the land. But obviously it could work both ways if they're careless.
I think anyone who's a passionate outdoors person, be it kayaking, canoeing, cycling, fell running, hill running, they're all there to be custodians. No one's going there to do damage.
Yeah.
What about the policy risks and changes on things? Is that something that you factor in? Has the sort of mood music been a negative or a positive for you guys?
So again, this is where choosing the U.S. Over many other countries in the world where they're doing forestry projects is, we thought the rule of law here is as stable as any place in the world. Like, if we buy land, we don't have any question that that land is going to be taken away in some sudden government takeover. And so, or the project is going to be usurped by some government agency or entity. So, we really, we think that for all this, it's a little, there's other tumultuous things here in terms of the legal and government environment, but land ownership is not one of them. And so, we didn't really see a lot of regulatory potential that would put our project at risk. If anything, maybe things will evolve and carbon will be regulated and there may be more opportunity, but I think that our risk assessment of that, of anything government sort of driven, is relatively low here.
What's the insurance product market like in the US? Are there a range of tools at your disposal now, or is that still really early?
So it is developing, and we did actually have an insurance product that was sort of bespoke for our financing deal. So we're evolving that. There are definitely a couple of carbon insurance providers. Kita is the one that I know best.
We've had Natalie Dorfman on the podcast.
Yeah,
she's amazing.
She's wonderful. I have met her as well. And there are a few others. And so I think that it is definitely it's something that's needed. And in fact, just this morning, I was talking to some of our team members, and we were discussing this whole buffer pool concept. So all of these registries that force the developers to put 10 or 15 or 20% of their credits into this buffer pool with no real clarity on how you ever get those credits out or what you have to do to qualify to use them. And, now the registries are just sitting on, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of credits. And it just is really inefficient. And so the conversation that we were having is, the way that this industry needs to evolve is, you don't have a buffer pool, but you have insurance. That's what insurance is. That's the purpose of that financial product, is if something is lost because of, foreseeable risks, then there is an insurance policy against it. And wouldn't that be a better world? So we are very pro insurance. It's just, how does that develop, and how, what's funding the policy, and what is it that they're insuring, and so forth. But anyway, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
the environment sector's done it to itself.
Mhm.
So the buffer pull, the requirement for additionality. I think the additionality bit's the most ridiculous thing ever. So imagine we were going out to a lovely restaurant this evening, but they only billed us for the difference in price between what we'd have paid at home and what the calorific content was. That's what they're asking us to do in natural capital. Or you go in to buy a new car and you only get billed on how much better it is than your existing car. It just makes no sense whatsoever. We hold natural capital products to a level of service that we don't do to anyone else. Who asked Coca-Cola what their social impact of that can of Coke was that week? Yeah, apparently we're supposed to do that, and we've done it to ourselves as a sector, and that's what's mad. And also it comes back to that point of the sort of moral superiority that, oh no, this is too important for markets. Everything else isn't. So we leave everything else to markets.
Right.
We
Your
can solve.
home. Like,
I had a brilliant one of those. So we got to the environment sector, the environment natural capital markets are too early. They're too volatile. And I was at a dinner with a retiring CEO of a bank, and he's like, "I've had 45 years in the finance sector. We've been at this for 100 years. How are we getting on?" He was like, "Do you remember 2008 and 2000 and listed off years?"
it's going well, isn't it?
Exactly. And he's like, there was almost an English accent there. That was good. He was like, you can't really accuse you guys of not getting it right yet when you've been doing it 10 minutes and we've been trying forever and still getting it wrong. Markets do that. I have two final questions.
Sure.
One of which is, what if we were sat here in 5 years' time, what do you hope for Chestnut? Where do you hope you are? What do you hope you've achieved?
So I feel that there was a period of time where most companies were starting to come up with a sustainability plan, a net zero target, and what their overall corporate commitments were. And I feel that there is some wavering in that market, or that, at least for US based companies. It's confusing how to think about that in this time. So, I hope within a few years, there is just more clarity, and corporates and NGOs and others, obviously countries are grappling with this as well. But, speaking for the US, because that's most of our buyers are US based companies, that there is just more clarity and kind of some consistency, and a acknowledgement and real acceptance that, like, this is part of an overall sustainability strategy. And that in that time, Chestnut has stayed the course, that we have brought these two products and have come out with other products that, continue to be high quality and seen as high integrity and all the things that we want to be. And that, that's sort of a perfect convergence of, this demand is continuing to grow, our credits, we're continuing to build out a broader portfolio and bring more credits to market, and that we are able to really satisfy a need that I think will grow over time. And so it's, really the last 2 years for Chestnut have been, building our capabilities, building our team, and now it's truly staying the course on our core product portfolio, while exploring what are some ways that we can grow. So I guess that was a long-winded answer. In 5 years from now, I hope that the market has accepted that this product, like every company, should be buying some kind of removal to offset what they will unavoidably emit, and that, we are continuing to be a market leader and a model for what good looks like, and that, others have followed in our path, that the carbon developer market is continuing to mature and stabilize, that there are financing mechanisms in place and insurance mechanisms in place that just make the whole thing feel a lot more stable and sustainable. And so, and I expect us and hope that we are, they're just continuing to build on this base that I think is really strong, on which we are now.
What's the one question I haven't asked you I should have?
Oh man. Uh, I haven't talked much about our conservation membership program, and it's a really important part of our story, and was actually the initial, kind of project that the company was founded on. And it's really important. And so I'd love for you to ask me, what,
Consider yourself asked.
what place our IFM, improved forest management program plays sort of in our overall, just our mission, as well as our product portfolio. And this is our leased model. So I've been talking a lot about our forest restoration, in which we buy the land. For our conservation, this started with Forest Carbon Works, and we continued it as a lease model that is designed to enable small forest landowners to both protect their forest and monetize their forest in a way other than harvesting and participate in the growth of the carbon markets. So we enter into 60-year contracts with forest landowners, and most of them harvest. Some aren't harvesting that actively, but almost all of them harvest at some point. And more importantly, over 60 years, there's a high statistical likelihood that they would harvest this forest for financial distress, change of hands, new generation, new owner, whatever. Very likely that these trees would have been harvested. And we are able to give them the opportunity to sign a long-term conservation commitment in which we source credits, we calculate credits based on their land. We do all the work to audit and work with the registry and issue those credits, commercialize those credits, sell them, and then we share that revenue with the landowner. And at this point, we have 287 individual landowners signed up, 188,000 acres of forest land that we are protecting across 37 states, and we're growing that very quickly. And it's in the 2 years that I've been here, the awareness of and interest in carbon projects has skyrocketed among private forest landowners. And I think that we are really seen as not just one of the largest, but I've been told that we're incredibly trustworthy. We are transparent. We are, very, very just responsive and open and available for landowners. We really, answer their questions and work with their families and their lawyers and their financial providers and so forth. And, we are just very candid with them about what we think the opportunity is for them, and most of them end up coming on board. And so I think that this is our way to very quickly scale impact across the entire country, and that has equal benefits to protecting those forests with the environmental benefits, with the air and water and soil quality improvements. And so that's because I said, wear that hat of enrolling private landowners. That's my team, working very closely with our forestry team and product team and many others across the organization. And it's a big part of our portfolio, and I think what we represent, which is not just the mission to conserve and protect forests, but to give that opportunity to small landowners. And that is the product that we have sold to JP Morgan, to Apollo Global, to Sol Systems, which is a renewable energy project developer, and several others. And so I think those are the credits that we have now that are sort of in inventory, can be purchased, can be retired for current use. And I think that it's just a really important part of our overall portfolio and our mission across the US.
It's a wonderful story. Shannon, I'm continuously blown away by what you and Chestnut have achieved, and it makes me really proud to be in the same sector and industry. So thank you very much for inviting us in, welcoming to your offices, and letting us tell some of your story.
Well,
really appreciate it.
Fantastic to meet you in person. I'm so glad we met.
Thank you.